Let's face it, parenting is the most important job on earth. Every day presents a stack of different challenges, and more often than not, the answer is outside of the box. On this podcast, we will offer proven strategies, interview pioneers in education, give insights into how to be successful parents, and even share our imperfect experiences of being parents ourselves. We're all in on this journey, and we will span the globe to find out what is working and who has the answers. This is the Sound Foundations for Parenting podcast. Here are your hosts, Darren McCarthy and Brian Powers.
Let's do it. You got 3 minutes. Roll.
Darren, so today we're talking to Eric Sigman. What do we, tell us just a little bit about you. You met up with Eric on LinkedIn, right?
I did. I saw an art. Actually, I saw the article online, and basically this claim that what really stood out to me is you like outside the box thinkers that are still in the school districts because they're real change makers. And Eric is an administrator in the Connecticut school system, and he decided to take his desk and put it in the hallway. So he totally eliminated the barriers between he and his students. And as I learned more from, the article basically gave that whole outline and his kind of philosophy for doing it, but then he extended that idea, and he was saying that there was a lot of disruption going on in that hallway. And as soon as he popped himself out there and kind of integrated himself into their lives and allowed them to communicate with him, it removed the barriers, and it really, the behavior kind of decreased and everything got better. So I love when, like I said, I love when an administrator or somebody that's a potential change maker really does something outside the box that can, remove the barriers and get things done. And he proved to be that guy.
Yeah, he, still in the trenches, so to say, but like you're right, he definitely is big on change, thinking outside the box. I like his statement of, that we're using for the title for this episode, one size fits one. And you say it all the time. It's like, every kid is unique, and not everybody is the same type of learner.
Yeah, I mean, and he highlighted some of the kind of the restraints you have when you're working in a school district, from a budget standpoint and from a student to teacher ratio standpoint. So, it's good to have somebody come on now that's in the districts, that's working in the system, because, we're from a private perspective, we don't realize, how much they do and what they're dealing with on a daily basis. I think people have learned a lot more, learned how to respect their teachers a lot more through this, through this pandemic. But you don't realize that the teacher's kind of in the midst of it all. So they're dealing with parents, they're dealing with administrators, they're dealing with, students and all those dynamics. And, what I also like about him is he's done the teaching piece, he's in the administrator role, and he's doing consulting in the private world. So when you kind of bridge those three gaps together, you can really make some change, and you can really learn a lot. I learned a lot of stuff outside of the public education system. Sure. I tried to bring it back in when we worked with the San Diego Unified School District. And, I just love to see that happen. People like Eric can really, help us keep that conversation going. I'd love to have him back on and talk about, what happens in the fall, because we did touch on that topic. And, he also touches on, we covered a lot because this is the first time out of the gate with Eric, but we wanted to figure out kind of what's going on with the schools, where they stand right now from a curriculum standpoint. And one of the things that really stood out for me was we always talk about, the how before the what. So process before content. And he threw in the word why, which was kind of the first time I've heard that. So it's like, it's not just how we learn or what we learn, but it's why we're learning it.
Sure.
And then he brought in the theory of civics and getting back to, those base elements for why we learn what we learn. Great stuff.
I think not the last time with him. And I think, he's definitely bit by the entrepreneur bug, another different thing that sets him apart when it comes to kind of education and educator. So I think we'll be hearing from him again. But let's get into the episode, and we'll just remind people too, to go ahead and leave us a review if possible. Tell us what you like about the show. If you don't like something, let us know too. But, wherever you're listening, whether it's on iTunes or Google, please go ahead and review the show for us. We'd really appreciate it. Love to get the feedback. With that being said, let's get into the episode with Eric Sigman.
Awesome. Good stuff. Cool.
All right. Welcome, Eric Sigman. Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Eric, just give us a little bit of your background and what you do.
Okay. So I grew up on Long Island in New York. My father was a police officer and my mother was a city school teacher. The lessons I learned were to add value and to work hard. And that's always been my mantra and always been my guiding force, whether it be parenting or teaching or being an administrator. Having 4 kids within 3 years has also been a defining moment in my life. And I always like to guide my work as if my children are in the room, whether it be as a math teacher or as an administrator. I always like to pretend that my children are always watching. My career, if you look at my resume, is engineer in reverse. For those that don't know the tri-state area, I started my career in very, very affluent districts and then kind of moved away towards affluent districts and decided I wanted to really make an impact on education in the world and decided to go to a more high need population. And within that, I also learned about what education really is and what 21st century education is kind of moving towards. In my profession or in my career, I was a K-12 STEM coordinator and then decided to kind of be like an investigative reporter and work in a brand new STEM school. And it was that point that I really learned what STEM education should look like. But I feel like the most important factor in teaching and learning is relationships. And that's always the piece that we have to look at as human beings. We have to look at the relationships between student and teacher, teacher and parent, teacher and administrator, administrator and student. And if we really focus on the relationships, the learning will come.
Great. Yeah. And so with 4 kids, there's a wide variety of personalities there as well. And I understand you have a son going to college soon.
Yes. So I have 4 children. I have basically 4 teenagers. I have a 12-year-old daughter, 14-year-old twins, and a 15-year-old who will be attending the Cooper Union School in Manhattan. 2 of my children have special learning needs, and then I have my 15-year-old son who is profoundly gifted. So I'm a firm believer that it's one size fits one, as well as my wife, that we really have to create an individualized education plan for each child and for them to be successful. What works for one doesn't always work for all. And that's always been a guiding principle of ours.
Fascinating. So one of the first things my wife said, so she has a master's in ed psych and used to teach at the Milton Hershey School. And one of the first things she said when we all started to have to work from home was, instead of doing a weekly group meeting, why don't we move to, why doesn't the teacher move to 21-hour sessions? And I thought that was an interesting way to look at it, kind of expanding upon that idea of that one-to-one piece. Obviously, everybody was on their heels trying to figure out how to do this, and this was just a crazy kind of time. What was it like for you, kind of adjusting to this? Yeah, the pandemic and everything else.
Oh, the pandemic.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. The one-to-one has always kind of been in the backdrop for the past 15 years, and we've looked at differentiation, and it's always been in the background. You okay there, Brian? Okay. So differentiation has always been around for probably the past 15 to 20 years, and the pandemic really helped us kind of see the need for technology integration in our schools. Unfortunately, I was transitioning to a new job when the pandemic hit. I was an administrator in Bridgeport and decided to leave mid-year to help my local school district fill a hard vacancy that they couldn't. But the pandemic hopefully will bring some light to what instructional technology should really look like in the classrooms. If we take the book report, a book report's still a book report if I type it on a word processor. A book report's still a book report if I type it in Google Docs. It's the outcomes that we have to look at to really say that we're integrating technology. There are a lot of teachers out there that will just use a smartboard as a glorified chalkboard. There are a lot of teachers out there that will use PowerPoint instead of direct lecturing. At the end of the day, it's still direct lecturing. Right. You're not really integrating technology. You might be a little bit more efficient. And as an administrator, I always try to look at outcomes and improving those outcomes through using different tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's, you see the advancements of technology kind of outside of the schools, and you realize it's virtually impossible to keep up with. Just from the perspective of what we do with the podcast, for example. We have the capacity to change audio through transcripts, and there's all this advanced, technology. And I think you have to have a real clear set understanding of where you want to go and how you want to teach in order to implement the right technological strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's important to teach how to think and not what to think. And I think that's where we need to go as an educational system, that we have to teach kids, the 4 C's of critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity, that we're not just sitting and listening to a lecture for an hour. That's not happening. We need to be able to engage these kids. And I always tell the teachers that I observe that there's a fine line between engagement and compliance, that when I come in, I want to see engagement. And I want to see kids working. I want to see kids thinking. I want to see kids grappling. I want to see kids persevering. I always use the analogy of a heavy table. If I ask the teacher to carry the table by themselves, it's much harder to do it than if I asked a bunch of kids to take one end and we all lift it together. And that's how teaching and learning should be, that we're each given a piece and try to figure it out, as opposed to me telling you all that I have in my head.
Right, because like you said, one size fits one. When you have multiple people working on something collaboratively, you bring your own skill set to the table, right?
Which is how the real world works.
You're absolutely. I think even more so now, right? Because you have the ability to collaborate with people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I go back to, like, I taught in the early 90s. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so these were the years where you had to write a lesson plan for the physical, and then for the auditory piece, the visual piece, and the kinesthetic piece, and multiple lesson plans to address multiple modalities or methodologies.
Yeah,
it was a great concept, and then it just kind of faded away. It was
called cooperative learning, also.
Yeah, there you go. Absolutely, yeah. And it seems to me like there's these trends that they're a great concept, but not the implementation becomes so cumbersome that it can't be held. What's the old expression? An idea is worth a penny, implementation 99 cents.
I also think it's the same thing when you look at cooperative learning. When we look at differentiation, it's the same thing, just kind of more thought out and more thorough, because you're supposed to address those different types of learners. Mm-hmm. The auditory, the kinesthetic, the visual, all, and we're trying to meet kids at where they're at.
I hope that, coming out of this and kind of being the parent in this conversation, we look at, everyone's saying, teachers have a tough job, and I don't disagree with that. But I also hope that we see that things have to be looked at differently now, like what we're talking about. You said one size fits one. It just, my 7-year-old is different from my 9-year-old in learning. And I don't think we're very close to that, if at all. No,
and I think you have to provide teachers with the professional development and the feedback when you go into classrooms. You have to, as an administrator, you cannot be punitive. It's a work in progress, and it's a learning curve. Teachers have to be willing to give up the control of the learning, and that's the hardest part, because when you're teaching it, they say to themselves, including myself, because I always joke, I said I was classically trained. I told you, so you should know. But that's not how it really needs to be. It needs to be, modeling and really having the kids kind of working together and demonstrating that understanding.
Yeah. Well, and what I Brian doesn't know this background, but I the way I got to you is I saw this little article that was written about how you had taken your desk and dropped it in the hallway and allowed yourself to be, how you say, approachable by the students. And I think that goes back to your relationship piece. How are you going to understand how to deliver the right education to the child without understanding kind of their whole background, where they come from, what are their skill sets, what are their deficits? They in education we use that word gestalt, the whole child, and so that move was, to me, kind of elevated you from a lot of the others that are just kind of, like you said, classically trained, do as I say, don't do as I do, or
exactly.
So what inspired that, and what's been the result of it?
So that article on NPR was a backdrop to the comm room that I created, which is Come and Learn Mindfulness, where I partnered with a local yoga studio to bring mindfulness, because you can't call it yoga, into the schools. As far as putting the desk in the hallway, I was in one of the roughest schools in the city of Bridgeport. For those that don't know Bridgeport is 100% free lunch. And free breakfast as well. There were just a lot of challenges in the hallway, and I felt I needed to be visible in order to change the culture of the school, because I was in there. I came in November of 2018, I think, and decided that we really needed to change the culture, because I was constantly coming when there were problems. So I put my desk in the hallway and put a sign up that said Mr. Sigman's satellite office. And within a few days, that hallway was clear. Like, there were no problems in the hallway. It was like an old Western film. But prior to that, it was a real, how do you say it nicely? It was chaos. Uh-huh. But it also told the teacher, it made statements that I'm here for you, the students. I'm here for you, the teachers. Let's get this done. So, and holding people accountable. So being in the hallway, it's, where's your pass? How are you today? I'm able to check in. Mm-hmm. Not just kids coming to me when something's wrong, that I could also see them when something's not wrong, and building that relationship. Because sitting in an office didn't really garner any benefit to the students or the teachers. It garnered me benefit. I can get a lot of work done, but I'm hired to build relationships, not to, build spreadsheets.
Right. Well, and it's stemming. So it starts with that relationship, so that you understand the child and their background and their needs and so on and so forth. But how do you get to the one size fits one in an environment where, there's money involved, and it's, you've got so many staff, and how do you kind of adjust? Like, what's the first pebble that you can drop in that lake where you can start the ripple effect?
So it's important to really try to leverage your community resources and create programs that really help children. Because at the end of the day, the staff that's there is amazing, but they're overutilized, and they're underappreciated most of the time, underpaid, and they don't have the time to really dig into the issues. The support staff that's there is dealing with mandated hours that are in IEPs and 504 plans, not kids that are in crisis. And when you work in an urban district, a lot of these kids might not be quote unquote classified, but they're high need, and they suffer from a lot of trauma. And it's my job and my hope that I can hopefully try to guide them through their day and make them successful and or happy at the end of the day. I can't do it every day. I'm not going to do it all the time. But at the end of the day, I want to provide them, a safe place to learn.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, being a parent yourself, with kids that need some attention. We all of our kids need attention, and so how do you talk to a parent in the sense that this is the school's responsibility, and some of these other services that you might need are kind of outside of the walls of the school? I've always had trouble with that, in the sense that you go to an IEP and the parent wants well, the child needs certain services, and they might be a whole list from OT to speech to so on and so forth. But the school can only provide so much, and in the end, you might have to do something out of those walls on your own. How do you balance that? Like,
you have to advocate for the child, whether you're on, whatever side of the desk you're on, whether it be as the administrator or the parent. You have to advocate for that child. If the school can provide it, I would demand it, whether I'm an administrator or parent, because the child deserves the best. And a lot of times, unfortunately, when parents come to these, what we call PPT meetings, planning and placement teams, they're not aware of the services that the district can offer. So anything that affects the child's learning, the school is responsible for. And you have to make sure, as the administrator and or parent, that they're getting all the services that the school can provide. If there are additional services that are outside the purview of the school, some sort of medical things that are necessary, I would recommend certain places, or even behavioral therapy that might need to go on outside of the school day, because the school can only do so much. So it's our job as a PPT team to know what resources the community has and what they can provide. So we try to partner with the parents and try to educate the whole child.
And how is a good example of that is that mindfulness program. How is that going?
Pre-COVID or post-COVID?
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID was really, really good. Like I said, we were featured in NPR. We were featured in the local paper, the CT Post. I had a wonderful teacher who taught basically K through 6, and we had another wonderful volunteer. As far as I know, it's been going well. Kids are learning strategies, because that was my goal, to kind of regulate and be able to recognize their emotions.
Mm-hmm. And so we had a guest on, Allison Morgan, who runs Sensational Kids in Jersey, a very similar scenario where she's working, but she was highlighting the importance of mindfulness programs for teachers, because they're in a highly stressful environment. Is that part of the integration there with students and teachers? And
we tried.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, because you have to find the time, and you have to. There are teachers that want to, but just unfortunately their schedules are just so packed. And I think if you're going to really do this in earnest, you have to build that into the program, and you have to have the capacity to do it, where it's part of the day. And you have to make it a priority.
And it's recognized on both sides of the table.
Yes.
Too.
And if the kids, exactly. If the kids see the teachers participating and helping them with strategies, then the kids are more likely, because God only knows these, a lot of these kids need it when they go home. When they leave that school, it's a challenging place, and they need all the tools they can get to kind of survive and cope with their stressors.
Right. You seem like a guy with big dreams.
I try. I want to leave the world a better place than I came into it.
Is there something that you like? What the next program? You have any some other ideas of things that you would like to see?
I'd like to bring this mindfulness program to other high need districts. I think it's also needed in non-high need districts. But I think my first priority is to help the underserved, because they don't have the monetary resources to build a program like this, and to leverage those community partners to help the kids really, like I said, regulate, recognize, and redirect their emotions.
And so you brought up something earlier I want to bring back to light. We always talk here about what you learn before, how you learn prior to the what you learn, or we say process over content. But you had mentioned something in the middle there, which kind of pulls the fabric together, which is the why. Right. So why we learn. And I think that's how you attach reality to the students that you're working with. I remember one day when I first started my career, I was having a really hard day. The students just did not want to learn. And, they didn't want to be there. And it was just one of those days. And I think a lot of teachers have those days,
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of I was young and didn't know a whole lot, but I said, all right, let's just stop the curriculum. Let's talk about what you guys want to do. Let's talk about goals. And so everybody here, I said, everybody here who has a goal and wants to do something, sit on this side of the room. If you don't, sit on the other side of the room. So everybody gets up and they sit on the left-hand side of the room, which I was kind of mesmerized by, because there were kids, acting as if they didn't want to be there and didn't have a care in the world kind of thing. But tying that was my one little piece of tying that into kind of the why are you here kind of thing. And I mean, how do you see that fitting, the why fitting into the districts and kind of what you do after hours as well with your consulting piece?
I think getting them there is the hardest battle when you're in these high need populations. You have chronic absenteeism plaguing a lot of these schools. And when you have them there, you have to make it valuable, and you have to show value for, what you're doing. And the learning has to be connected to the why. Recently in my prior district of Bridgeport, they had a class that, I wasn't very fond of, called silent sustained reading. And I'm sure you could figure out what that is, where kids just take out a book allegedly, or a Chromebook, and pretend that they're reading. But I decided to change that course into what I called a PBL, problem-based learning, and really give them an avenue where they can explore interests. And one of the topics which garnered a lot of interest, which I kind of helped guide the teachers, was lessons in civics. Because of a lot of these students, and this is prior to the whole incident with George Floyd and whatnot, but being able to navigate the world as a minority and helping them understand, what the world looked like when you get older and how to navigate that, and just understanding how laws work and how relationships work, that it's important to kind of develop these relationships with law enforcement and other things, like things that are outside the curriculum. I don't need to teach them, like you said, Old Yeller. I need to teach them how to build relationships, how to critically think, and how to analyze things. That can be done in different venues. I don't have to teach a specific text to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a firm believer in not just college career ready, but also life ready. And that's my goal as an educator, is to, provide that skill set that helps them be successful in life. And it's not just, open a textbook. It's really giving them that skill set and that expertise in how to navigate a 21st century world, which has a lot of challenges in itself, and it's, the political landscape now, just there's so much enrichment that can be brought to students if we just look at all these things that are happening in present day America. I don't need to, yes, it's important to learn history, but if we look at present day America, there's so many real life lessons that we can learn and really become better people and better students because of it.
How hard is it to make a change to curriculum? So for example, I'm seeing a lot of talk about, algebra 1 is not as important as being able to balance your checkbook. Kind of a microcosm of what you were just referring to. It's like these real life skills that you need. You've been around the block a bit. How hard is it to make a change like that on a curriculum?
It's not about balancing a checkbook. Like I said before, it's all about the outcomes. Mm-hmm. It's about the importance of teaching kids how to plan. Yes, balancing a checkbook is important. Yes, the idea of home economics is important, which is a class that's no longer, or shop.
Right.
But that could all be integrated into the current curriculum. When we talk about technology, that's what the whole STEM, stream, STEAM, whatever you want to call it nowadays, is all about, is being able to integrate all these disciplines and to make the learning applicable. And if you teach kids how to problem solve and persevere, I never learned how to create a checkbook or balance a checkbook, but it's all about integers. But do I really need to learn how to balance a checkbook if you teach me how to use Excel?
Right.
If you teach me how to use Excel, I could figure it out. Uh-huh. And I think that's the problem that we have, is we're teaching the what to think and not how to think. And we have to move away from that idea, because it's like driving. I'm going to teach my kid how to drive. He's about to have his license. And I tell this to students all the time. Am I going to take you on every single road and give you every single scenario? No, I'm going to give you a good sense of how to drive. And then at the end of the day, you're hopefully going to become a good driver. I can't take you on every bridge. I might just take you on the Tappan Zee. But if you go over the George Washington, or if you go over the Henry Hudson Bridge, you're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing has to be portrayed in teaching and learning, that we have to teach the what to think, that we have to teach the how to think and not what to think.
Uh-huh.
That kind of leads us into, kind of the way the world is, and the where education system is leading now with, that whole kind of thought process that we all felt when we were in school, if you had to go to college, and that, you don't have to go to a traditional four-year college, but you do have to, better yourself and teach yourself a trade. And that's kind of, the STEM movement as well. That's kind of coming out of a lot of schools now and teaching these kids, to get into manufacturing and engineering.
Yep. I mean, when you see these big millionaires, multi-million billionaires are college dropouts like us. I'm reading the Steve Jobs book and Bill Gates, all these people dropped out of college. But you don't want to give the false hope that, you're going to be a millionaire if you come up with a great idea,
Correct. But, you can still make, I feel like it's not accepted that you could still make $75,000 to $80,000 annually in this country as a manufacturer, as a middle level manufacturer, and anywhere in our area, the neck of the woods. It's just it's crazy though, and we have to get past the stigma. And
yep.
My wife and I have this conversation / argument all the time that you don't need to come out of high school and go automatically into college, but you do have to better yourself. And teach yourself a trade to essentially make a living.
Honestly, I don't like, this is a part of a bigger discussion, but I don't want to talk about education in the sense like the healthcare system. Like it's something, as soon as you start going into the rabbit hole and discussing the topic, it becomes so complex that you can't even figure out where to start in figuring out what the problem is. And it's like, it's we can hone in on certain things because of child development, because of we know that the how is if not more important, just as important as the what. It's more about making those changes over the course of time, right? And we've never really had an educational revelation, as far as I know, and that's kind of what we need. But those game changers, I was always told, if you want to have a program in the schools that you feel is effective and different and outside the box, it's the parents that drive that difference. Is that still the same, or is it more of a kind of a, you got to go through the,
we really have a hard time with change in this country. We're still in that factory worker mentality. There are different views of Common Core, and people have their own beliefs in it, but Common Core and next generation science standards are a step in the right direction. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that affect change, but at the end of the day, it's that classroom teacher that closes the door and says, this is what I'm going to teach. And it's a hard pill to swallow, because like you said, college and graduate school is a gateway for a lot of these professions, but do I really need to go to college if I can learn all these things online? And that's a whole nother rabbit hole. Yeah. If I know how to learn and I can figure it out, why do I need the teacher? And that's a whole different conversation, so we have to change what we teach, and we have to make it meaningful and valuable to the student.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the change piece. I mean, it's like, take something that you've done in your career. I mean, let's just take the desk scenario, right? So it works, right? So the hallway, it sounds to me like on that experiment that it worked, to the sense that the hallway was calmer and created a better relationship with the kids. So who's going to be the next school to do something like that? And the mindfulness piece, it seems to be working. It's working in Jersey. It's working in in Connecticut. When does it become a national kind of phenomenon? And then all of these, there's big waves of change that come in small increments, I guess. But I think it's got to go past that. Changing the education system is too confusing. We can't even talk about doing it.
Well, it's all, unfortunately, it's all political.
Mm.
And people won't change unless, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, unless there's money tied to it. So, I always try to lead by what's best for students. And I don't need a lot of resources to run a school, but what I do need is teachers that, and I've had them many a times, teachers that want to change and want to do what's best for kids.
Right. And that's another big wave, right?
The teacher has a profound effect on students, in both directions. You can have a great teacher that will set you up for your whole life, and then you can have a really difficult teacher that will destroy you. And that there needs to be some equity and some accountability.
Yeah, agreed. So how does your consulting firm work?
So I dabble in a lot of different areas wherever it's needed. In the past, I've done some textbook consulting. I've worked with College Board and helped write their pre-AP Algebra 1 book. I've also been the keynote speaker for the Archdiocese of New York. I've also worked with the writers of the Common Core to help align their state assessments to the standards. And then more locally, I provide math tutoring and special ed advocacy to parents. So anything to make a buck, basically.
You're not busy at all.
No, but like I said, with 4 kids and college really, creeping up, I need to step up my game. So if you know any side hustles that I can partake in, please feel free to pass them my way.
Yeah, they move with the technological advancement of all school districts.
Yeah.
Like you said, that's great stuff. Brian, any more questions?
No, this was great. I think we need to reschedule for maybe have that difficult conversation during a happy hour.
Which
difficult conversation? There's so many.
Well, I mean, listen,
what about changing the education system?
It's all about accountability, and maybe we'll talk once I'm not recorded.
Yeah.
It's challenging because when you tie scores and performance to test scores, it becomes very challenging. That there are other variables outside of a test score, that dictates a kid's success. But what you really want to look at is their growth. And whenever I observe teachers, I would say, okay, if you want to be proficient, if you want to be accomplished, the middle of the ground, you get me a year's worth of growth. But if you want to be exemplary, then you got to show me at least 1.5 years worth of growth for more than 60 to 70% of the population. Because doing 1 year's worth of growth, and I could tell you stories upon stories. I had a teacher tell me, my kids will either stay the same or not go lower. And once we turn off the record button, I'll tell you what I really said, and it's like, we have to push, we have to do what's uncomfortable for us in the sense of student learning. We got to push the envelope. We got to raise the bar. We have to do what's best for the kid. We have to look at practices that are best for the students, not what's best for the teacher.
Yeah. And I think you hit on the biggest topic of all. That starts with relationship.
Yeah.
You can't just be in that job or that field, or even in our job as, on the podcast world. You can't just be doing it for the sake of doing it.
You have to have purpose.
You
have to have purpose.
You need the purpose, and you need to be attached to listen, there's people that understand kids and people that don't.
Yep.
People that understand kids need to roll up their sleeves and kind of become united to make the change.
And there are kids that don't understand. There are people that don't understand kids that have been teaching for 30 years or even 5 or 10 that are in it and can't get out.
Yeah. I definitely taught with a few of those.
Only a few? Okay.
Well, I only taught for 2 years.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years. It's heartbreaking. There are a lot of great teachers out there, but there are teachers that are just stuck.
Uh-huh.
And that's a whole nother conversation in itself, is just guiding, and I've done that. I've counseled teachers out of the profession. Right. And that's a hard conversation.
Yeah, I agree. So what on the consulting side, how do people get a hold of you?
They can go to my website or email me. My website is E2B Concepts. E as in Eric, T-O-B as in business owner, concepts.com, or email me at eric@e2bconcepts.com. Or LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm all over the place.
Good stuff. All right. Well, we appreciate having you here, and we have lots to talk about in the future. So
My pleasure. Anytime, guys. It was an absolute pleasure.
Good stuff. Thanks for coming, Eric.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Sound Foundations for Parenting podcast with your hosts, Darren and Brian. Find them on social media at Sound Foundations for Parenting. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe. And we'll catch you next time on the Sound Foundations for Parenting podcast.